Now, the new diplomacy between Cuba and the U.S. has kept politicians and analysts busy forecasting the impact, including Latin America. Nitza Soledad Perez reports.
Cuba has been open to Latin American investment for a long time, but it's been thwarted in large measure by the Helms-Burton Act, a bill passed by the U.S. Congress back in 1996 that made America's long-standing Cuban embargo a federal law.
It's been stymied by just the fear that the U.S. might bring legal action against companies, whether they're from Latin America or from Europe. So, in some measure, the fact that there will not be a real prosecution of Helms-Burton opens up the possibility for others to invest in Cuba, including Latin American companies.
Brazil is spearheading a $1 billion project to modernize Cuba's deepwater port at Mariel and also build a 180 square miles special industrial zone. A Mexican meat processing company will be among the first Latin American companies to invest in that zone. Many predicted that Cuba's opening would draw tourists to Cuba and away from other Caribbean nations. So far, that hasn't happened. The Caribbean is hot, very hot. The big winner may be the U.S. One estimate from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce said the embargo costs the U.S. around $1.2 billion in lost business every year, around twice the estimated losses suffered by Cuba. Yet, even as the two countries take concrete steps to normalize trade, some analysts remain skeptical about Cuba's ability to attract significant foreign investment.
There's going to be very little investment in Cuba. First, because the Congress hasn't lifted the embargo, number one. Number two, because Cuba has a legal system that does not protect foreign investment.
While analysts like Suchliki argue the lack of legal safeguards could make companies skittish about development projects in Cuba, billion-dollar investments like Brazil's is evidence to the contrary. So even though some Latin American countries remain tough critics of the U.S., Gamarra says at least their criticism hasn't gotten worse.
There's the sticky situation of Venezuela and some of the allies, Bolivia and to a certain extent Ecuador, who insist on playing the U.S. as the boogeyman, right? But that message really, I mean, the results of the summit on the one hand and what has transpired since tell you that that message has really been muted.
At least one big obstacle to normalize trade remains. More than a half-century after Washington imposed an embargo on Cuba, the U.S. Congress still hasn't voted to lift it. Nitza, Soledad, Perez, CCTV, Miami.